Greetings, folks from St. Mark's. I bring you love and joy from St. Nicholas here in Hamilton. I'm going to talk to you today and have some reactions from you about the Gospel according to Pauli Murray. Pauli Murray, 1910 to 1985, was ahead of her time every single day of her life. I admire that. Pauli was sainted by the Episcopal Church in 2012. I was privileged to preach the gospel at an annual service honoring her at one of her former parishes, St. Titus, in North Carolina. The gospel appointed for Pauli's feast day is Matthew 5, 1 through 12. You got it, the Beatitudes. We could dismiss class right now and say that's the gospel according to Pauli Murray, but let's don't. Let's learn something of her amazing journey. Blessed Pauli was an architect of two of the most important social justice movements of the 20th century, the civil rights struggle and the women's movement. She was a powerful poet, a brilliant legal theorist, a labor organizer, a challenge of the status quo in government, church, and society, a staunch proponent of nonviolence in all things, and the first Black woman vested an Episcopal priest. One of my favorite quotations from Pauli is this: "I have never been able to accept what I believe to be an injustice. Perhaps it is because of this I am America's problem child and will continue to be." At the same time, Bishop Henry Delaney, who confirmed her, pronounced her at age 17 a child of destiny. Both are true. Pauli grew up with her aunt and grandparents in Durham, North Carolina. Her grandmother Cornelia had been born into slavery. Cornelia's mother was frequently raped by her owner. Graduating high school at 15, Pauli went out on a long limb of resistance to attend integrated Hunter College in New York City, graduating in 1933. Probably the worst year in U.S. history to enter the job market. She held a variety of jobs with the WPA's Workers' Education Project and the National Urban League, drifting in and out of poverty. In 1938, Pauli Murray applied to the graduate program in sociology at the University of North Carolina, a school that did not accept African Americans. She fought valiantly, but was not admitted. She did, however, get into two other notable American institutions, jail and law school. 15 years before Rosa Parks, Pauli refused to sit in the back of a bus. In an incident living out her faith in nonviolence, she and her friend were thrown into jail in Virginia. Pauli dived into the thick of things with the Workers' Defense League, representing a Black sharecropper sentenced to death for shooting a white man. This passion set her off on a journey towards law school at Howard University with what she called the single-minded intention of destroying Jim Crow. During this time, Pauli had begun to impress folks like Thurgood Marshall and Eleanor Roosevelt. She and Eleanor would become lifelong friends and spiritual political companions on the journey. At Howard University Law School, Pauli's gender abruptly became an issue. All her classmates, all the faculty were male. When on the first day of class, a professor announced that he didn't know why a woman would want to go to law school, she knew that, number one, she would become the top student. And number two, she would spend much of her life working to end what she began to call Jane Crow. As a tangent here, when you next watch the film RBG, look especially for the part that involves Pauli Murray. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even though they didn't help write it, named Pauli Murray and Judge Dorothy Kenyon as co-authors of her brief in the famous Reed versus Reed case. They had been pioneers in creating the legal strategy for fighting sex discrimination. Applying to Harvard for further training after her law degree from Howard, Pauli was told that she was not of the sex entitled to be admitted to study at Harvard Law School. Neither her own efforts nor President Roosevelt's intercession persuaded them. She went to Berkeley instead. Pauli produced a 746-page book entitled States' Laws on Race and Color that exposed the extent and the insanity of American segregation. The ACLU distributed copies to law libraries, black colleges, human rights organizations. Thurgood Marshall kept it stocked at the NAACP offices. He called it the Bible of Brown versus Board of Education. After some time at a New York law firm, at which for more than one reason she was in a minority, Pauli took an overseas job at the recently opened Ghana School of Law. This time and space helped integrate her personal history with her social and cultural activism back in the U.S. She co-authored the Constitution and Government of Ghana. Upon returning to the U.S. in 1962, Pauli was appointed to President Kennedy's Committee on Civil and Political Rights. She served on the board of directors for the ACLU. In 1966, Pauli told feminist Betty Friedan that she believed the time had come to organize an NAACP for women. Together, they launched NOW, the National Organization for Women. Though few people knew it during her lifetime, Pauli, the passionate advocate for women's rights, identified as fundamentally male. In her words, one of nature's experiments, a girl who should have been a boy. It has been written, or as Jesus would say, you have heard it said. Murray's silence about her gender identity, like her nation, must be fully integrated. She hated, she wrote, to be fragmented into Negro at one time, woman at another, worker at another. I recently read a great description of these times. As the civil rights movement was sidelining women, the women's movement was sidelining minorities and other people, poor people. You know by now, this territory was right up Pauli's alley of intersectionality. She held her own in debates with everyone from Dr. King to groundbreaking feminists. She was indeed a black activist, but she believed true equality was contingent on economic justice. Pauli was often angry, often sad about these things. Reminds me of Jesus. I'll send you forth now with your facilitator with a poem that Pauli wrote called Collect for Poplarville. It's written in the liturgical style of the Book of Common Prayer, which she loved. Thanks for your work on that. I hope you enjoyed it. and got some indication of how Pauli Murray, her life and work, are gospel-oriented. To continue. In Pauli's struggle for justice and equality, all structures of power and authority were fair game, especially the church. She left her beloved Episcopal Church, in fact, all church, for a while, saying this: "The history of Episcopalianism in the United States reveals a consistent policy of subordination, not merely of Negroes, but also of women. While it has begun to recognize its failure to fulfill its Christian mission in the case of Negroes, what it has not fully recognized is its equal and far more extensive failure to fulfill its mission with respect to half or more of the human race, namely women." Pauli worked tirelessly, as usual, towards women's ordination in the Episcopal Church. Then, to make a good long story short, she entered the General Seminary in 1973. My sister Pauli and I have at least two things in common. I attended General as well, many years later, and on our general ordination exams, some grueling tests we take to verify that we are suited for the ministry ahead of us, Pauli and I both scored pretty low on one particular section: ethics. That is, morals, matters of conscience. I am in good company, hopefully pushing the envelope. Why the priesthood for Pauli? In her position as a layperson, she had been unable to provide for the spiritual needs of more than one person dear to her. Now, in this new part of her journey, civic and religious leadership would be unified. "I came into the priesthood," Pauli wrote, "because I had no other alternative. I fought death, God, and my own articulated plans, but the call would give me no peace until I had made the decision. All the strands of my life had come together. Descendant of slave and slave owner, I had already been called poet, lawyer, teacher, and friend. Now I was empowered to minister the sacrament of one in whom there is no north or south, no black or white, no male or female, only the spirit of love and reconciliation, drawing us all toward the goal of human wholeness." Have fun with the next questions and think, how is Pauli Murray preaching the gospel?